Hi everyone, this is Lisa and welcome to Lisa's Stamp Studio and the January studio stamps in the mail. Heart Happiness and the Sweet and Sassy Framelits. Inside your envelope you should have all your pre-cut supplies. You'll have Ziploc bag with your accessories and you'll have 2 pieces of Whisper White cardstock. They'll have X's on them indicating your scratch paper. These are the pieces that we're going to die cut from. You're going to need your Heart Happiness stamp set. You're also going to need your Sweet and Sassy Framelits that came inside your package. Yours is not going to have the magnetic sheet that I added to mine. You're going to need your black ink of choice. I like Memento since the stamp set is photopolymer. That's just my ink of choice. You're also going to need your Melon Mambo and your Calypso Coral ink pad. Your adhesive, your dimensionals. I'm a fan of my bone folder. Of course, you're going to need your clear blocks, your Big Shot. You're going to need glue to put your sequins on and the gold foil sentiment that I've die cut for you. That's going to be of your choice. You're going to need a couple sponge daubers. You can see I've already used these. I'm going to reuse them again. And I like a pick-me-up tool to help me lift those sequins. This is completely optional. You do not need to have it. I'm also going to be using, of course, my silicone craft sheet because I really like this for small areas that I put adhesive on. Again, this is not mandatory, but I think after you see it, you're going to think you need one, that's for sure. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Our first card is going to look like this. These are the contents. I'm going to go ahead and make one of everything with you during the video just to save a little bit of time. You're going to go ahead and pull out everything to make 2 if you want to work in an assembly line fashion. So you're going to have your cardstock, your strip of designer paper, and your die cut words for the word love. Also inside that envelope, you're going to find a piece of scratch paper that says template on it. I'm going to set those aside. I'm going to start by folding my cardstock in half. Remember, all the cutting dimensions are in the PDF tutorial that is attached to the video link that you would have received in the email. This card is going to actually be done in the landscape fashion. I'm going to put all those other pieces aside because we're going to be working on the ink part first. On the original card, you're going to see this heart here, and you're going to notice it's not a stamp. So I'm going to teach you a fun trick to use your dies. Now let's talk about these framelits. There are lots of sizes, and there's 2 different shapes. You're going to notice that the great thing about these die cuts is the layering effect. You're going to have sizes to layer all the way up and all the way down. Go ahead and choose the one that you want. And we are actually going to die cut this here just a little bit off center on the template piece of paper. So I've got my Big Shot here. I like to use the magnetic platform. It is not required. You can use your multi-purpose platform with your tab 1 for your thin dies. I've got a clear mat on the bottom, which I'll use this exact same sandwich for all the projects. So here's that scratch paper marked template. I'm going to place my heart on here just slightly off center. So I've got probably, about an inch over here on the end of the die. Clear mat over the top, and then we're going to die cut this. So I'm just going to crank that through. All that popping and cracking that you hear with your Big Shot is all normal. And it's actually the negative that we want. This is where we're actually going to use our dauber. This scratch piece of paper can be used for a gift tag if you'd like. So we've got our template. We've got the base of our card. All I'm going to do is I'm going to actually literally hold this over the top of my card. And I'm going to grab my dauber. You can see that I've used this one before. And I'm going to use the Melon Mambo ink. So I'm going to open up my ink pad. Now, if your ink pad is really juicy, I'm going to recommend that you do what I do. You do not want to have the ink so strong on here that you can't control the coverage. Boy, have I made that mistake. So I'm going to give you some tips along the way. You may want to watch me first before you get started. So I'm just lining this up to measure exactly the same size as my card front. All right, and then I'm going to hold it here with my left hand to hold it in place. So I'm going to ink up my dauber. Now, at first, your dauber's not going to have a lot of ink on it unless you have daubers dedicated to a certain color. So you're going to find that right away it's not going to be very, very dark. But I know this one is because I've used it several times. So I'm going to actually ink off quite a bit because I want to be able to control it. And I'm going to work in small circular motions between the edge of the template and the outside. So just like this. And I'm going to work small circular motions, and I'm going to work small areas at a time. I find that that works better. What you don't want to do is you don't want to get up underneath the template. So just take your time. How light or dark you want it are completely up to you. So I'm just going to go round and around. You're looking to try to get even coverage if you can. You're going to invariably have some areas that are darker and lighter than others. But by providing this swirling motion, it's going to ensure that you don't have that polka dot effect from the dauber. So just take your time. And you can see now I'm about halfway done. And that little squeaky motion is from the sponge in the dauber. Your daubers can be washed out with soap and water and air dried. Just make sure that they're clean before you use them in another color. I would love to have a dedicated dauber to every color, but you know what? Storage is an issue. I'm thinking, where would I put those? And second of all, I just don't have that many daubers. I have probably 5 or 6, and I reuse them, and when they're not good anymore, I just toss them because they're inexpensive enough to buy new ones. All right, so I'm just about finished. The other thing is, while you're doing this, it's going to look a lot darker when you lift the template up than it does now. So keep that in mind. Remember, you can always add more ink, but you can't take it away. All right, so there we go. We've got our heart, and here's our template. I'm going to give you a recommendation. Take a tissue and come along the inside and make sure that that ink inside of there is dry and that there's no loose flecks, because then you'll get some ink outside the edges. Quite frankly, I think it looks kind of cool for that splattered effect, but if you don't like that, make sure that you do that. Let me grab my Calypso Coral ink pad because we're going to need that as well. While we've got this going, let's set the base to the side, and we're going to do a little bit of stamping. I've pulled out that little tiny heart, and I've got a solid heart here, and I've got my striped heart here, and I've got another small heart that comes in that same stamp set here. Now I'm working on the scratch paper. This is the one that has the X, and we are going to stamp the stripe heart in the Melon Mambo. So I'm going to stamp that up here. You'll need 2 if you're going to do 2 cards, and then I'm going to stamp the smaller heart. This is not the itty bitty one. I would call this the medium between the 3 in the Calypso Coral. And I'm going to stamp that one here. Make sure I got enough ink on there. I'm going to set those off to the side. We're going to die cut those in just a minute, but while I've got my ink out, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the base of my card. The larger of those 3 hearts I just showed you, we are going to use in the Calypso Coral ink. Now again, if you want to change up the order in which you're doing this or use different hearts, by all means, have fun, do it. So I'm going to stamp that one here, overlapping a little bit on that heart we created with the stencil. Remember, solid images, you're going to need lots of firm, even pressure. And then I've got the little tiny heart that I'm going to use in Melon Mambo, and that one's going to go up here near the top. Back to my big shot. My platforms are already set up. We've got our scratch paper here, and I am going to pull out the framelits for these. I can tell by the shape of this heart that this is going to be one of those deep cut hearts, and this is the second from the smallest. And I've got the smallest one from that same series that I'm going to die cut next to it. The great thing about using different framelits on a card is that you can line them all up and put them through the big shot all at the same time. So let me just line those up. If you're having difficulty keeping them in place, kind of like I am here, let's grab a Post-it note, or you can use washi tape. Just line that up the best that I can. Anchor that down with my little bit of Post-it note there, and I think this one will stay. Okay, clear mat over the top. And then we're going to crank those through. Remember, if you're doing both of your cards at the same time, you're going to want to pass this through a second time with your second set of images. Okay, so now we have our hearts. Back here to our card. Let's go ahead and add our designer paper here at the bottom. You're going to notice that I gave it to you longer than you need. There's nothing worse than I'm off by 1/16 of an inch and we've missed. And you can see that this is really, really narrow. So I'm going to grab my silicone craft sheets. I'm going to use that to help me get my adhesive on so it doesn't end up on my work surface. I love, love, love this silicone craft sheet. And if you've seen my videos before, you know that I'm a big fan of using it. I'm going to hold my paper vertically. I find it's easier for me to get this on here as close to the edge as possible. For some reason, horizontally, I just always seem to miss. So I'm just going to rub that on here. All right. I'm going to open up my card, and then from the inside, I've got a pair of scissors I use for sticky stuff because there's adhesive here. I am going to use the edge of my card as a guide to cut that paper. So I've got a nice flush finish here at the bottom. I'm going to grab my dimensionals and those two hearts that we die cut. So I'm going to flip those over. I'm going to put one dimensional on the back of the little one, and I'm going to do several dimensionals on this one. Take off their paper backing. And on this last little guy here. All right, we'll move this over. And then this one I chose to overlap a little bit here. And then this one here near the top. It's coming together, huh? All right. We've got our die cut words. I've die cut these in gold for you. You're going to notice that there's going to be some areas here. All I got to do is give it a little bit of a poke. I'm using my paper piercing tool just to kind of poke those out. And that I'm going to adhere with the multi-purpose liquid glue. I actually like this better than the fine tip glue because I find that the fine tip glue, which is this one, dries really quickly, and sometimes it dries too fast before I can get it on my card. So I'm going to flip that over. Again, I'm going to use my silicone mat because any glue that should fall outside is not going to leave my work surface sticky. I'm bringing in my paper piercing tool because it's going to help me pick that up. This bottle's almost done. So I'm just going to use tiny dots, and then I'm taking those dots and I'm moving it around with the tip. You do not need glue everywhere. So you don't think you've got to cover the whole thing. Just put small amounts. This multi-purpose glue does not dry clear. It's kind of tacky, which is one reason why I really like it. It gives you a little bit of time to work with it before it dries. But I love that it's really, really strong. So that's going to go down here near the heart and above the designer paper. So I lightly tack it in place, and then I flip it over and I rub from the back because invariably I always have ink on my hands and it ends up on the front of my card. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cap that. And inside your Ziploc bag with your accessories, there is a bag in a bag. And that's because I didn't want the little sequins and things to get tangled up inside of here. So inside you will find that you have two metallic gold hearts. These already have a glue dot on the back, making this really easy for you. So I like to use my paper piercing tool to help me lift that. And then I chose to put mine up here near the top. Now, when you make both of these, they might be slightly different, so give yourself a little bit of grace, right? They don't have to be identical. So the placement of your hearts can be slightly different. So there we go. We've got our first card. Great for anniversary, great for wedding, great for missing someone, even a great get well card. All right, let's move on to our second card. This will be the contents for our next card. And remember, you're going to have two of everything, and I'm going to make one right alongside with you. I've used the new Simple Stripes embossing folder for the front of this card. I cut away 1 inch because we're actually going to take the designer paper and we are going to adhere it to the bottom. Again, yours might be longer than this one because I want to make sure that I didn't short you. Let's go ahead and start by telling you that if you're going to put the words on, now is the time. The reason being is that you can make adjustments for this based on the size of the font that you're using. So you're going to go ahead and do that. You're going to see on my original that I did anniversary wishes. And many of you have been asking me, where did you get that? Well, believe it or not, this is the $100 level celebration stamp set, which means it's free with a $100 order. So I have anniversary and I have the word wishes here. So all I did was mix and match the stamps to come out with a new greeting. And that stamp set is called Happy Wishes. I'm going to go ahead for the sake of the video and leave that blank because I know that you're going to be using your own words. I'm going to grab my silicone craft sheet one more time. And the reason being is because we are going to put adhesive on the inside back of this card. And I don't need the full width of my adhesive because I'm only going to actually leave part of this hanging out. So I'm actually going to take this and half of the adhesive is going to go on the paper. And the other half is actually going to fall right here on the silicone craft sheet where nothing will stick to it. Obviously, if you had done that here, this would be good and sticky by now. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this like so, opening up my card. I'm just judging how much I want to show. And of course, you're going to gauge that based on the depth of the text on your greeting. All right, so there we go. So I've got my decorative edge now. We're going to go back to our scratch paper and we're going to use both of our ink pads one more time. I'm going to use the large striped heart using Melon Mambo ink. This heart does not have a die in the Sweet and Sassy framelits. I know, boo-hiss. It's actually part of another series, and that's outlined in the Occasions catalog on page 20. So I've got one here. Remember, if you're going to do two, to make two cards. And then I'm switching over to my Calypso Coral. And this time I want this heart lighter. So I'm actually going to ink it up, and I'm going to stamp off on my scratch paper. And then I'm going to stamp here on my scratch cardstock. So I've got the same shade. Oh, look at that. There's fuzz on here. Do you guys ever have that happen? All right, let me clean that on my Stampin' Scrub. It's right off camera. Probably picked it up from my table somewhere. So let's try that again. One more time. We're going to ink that up. See, I'm no different than you guys. Happens here in the studio all the time. And then here. So now we've got that lighter shade. I'm coming back to my Big Shot, same platform that we've used before, and I'm going to die cut. This is the same heart that we just used on the previous card, second from the largest of the deep hearts. And I'm covering up that die, and then I'm going to pass that through my Big Shot. Remember, if you're doing two, you're going to actually pass this through twice. I know I sound like a broken record, but I just want to remind you. All right, so now we've got our heart here. This one we're going to cut. So let me grab my paper snips, and I am going to come in here and I'm going to cut this heart out. Set my scratch paper aside. And then I'm just going to cut around. Now you're going to notice that I'm going to leave some white cardstock all around the edge. I try not to ever cut right on the stamp line because I find I can never cut straight, and that distorts the image if I cut it wrong. So I just leave a little bit of a border around it. Makes it look really very much like a framelit because those typically leave a border around our stamped images as well. All right, so we've got those here. We've got those two images. Here's the base of our card. Now inside your accessories Ziploc bag, you're going to find that you have gold metallic thread. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull out just one strand. If you're going to do both, make sure you pull them both out. And I'm going to get these ready. This one especially, because this is what's going to hold my metallic threads. Let me set that aside. I'm going to put dimensionals on the back. And I am going to be generous. So I'm going to do two here at the top. I'm going to do one in the center and one near the bottom. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to make sure that I have enough sticky area to hold my metallic thread. Now, if you're having trouble getting the tops off your dimensionals like I am, take your fingernail and press in the center, and that'll help lift those outside edges for you. All right, so here we've got our thread. So let me show you what I did. I used the width of my hand, and I started with the raw end here at the bottom, and I just wrapped it around, and I didn't make it tight. So you're going to go around maybe 3.5 times, and then you're going to slide that off, and then just kind of pinch it in the center. And trust me when I tell you, it doesn't matter. And I want to point this out to you. There's going to be an elevation difference. So this end right here, I'm going to put adhesive on. And this other end, I'm actually going to put a dimensional on because it's going to have to be actually deeper on this side. So I'm going to take my silicone mat, because sure enough, I'll get it all over my work surface. I'm going to put a little adhesive there, take off that paper backing, and then I'm going to mount this here. So adhesive is here, dimensional is here. Isn't that pretty and simple? So back inside the accessory bag, in the small one, you're going to find your sequins. So remember I mentioned that I like to use my pick-me-up tool. So I'm going to grab 3 sequins for each card. And you're going to have varying sizes. That's just how they come. So you've got a little bit of everything. So I'm going to do those, and then I'll have one other here at the bottom. I'm going to position these where I want them with my hands first. I find that I have better luck getting them right where I want them using my hands. Okay, this is where your fine tip glue is going to come in to adhere your sequence, but I've got a confession to make. If you are a Paper Pumpkin subscriber, yay you, because not only do you get an amazing kit with pre-cut supplies every month, you're also going to get these. These glue dots have paper backing on the top and they're flat, which makes them perfect to use for your sequence. I'm going to show you how to use one, and then I'm going to show you how to do the rest with fine tip glue to give you an option. I'm having a Murphy's Law moment. Oh my goodness. I did this whole thing and the camera turned off, the battery died. Okay, I know that most of you have stamped with me before, but let me just go over this with you because I don't want to rip this whole thing apart. So all I did was I took the Paper Pumpkin glue dots and I lift them up carefully with the paper piercing tool, and you can see how the glue dot stays flat. Once it's on the paper, all you have to do is take off the paper backing, which exposes the sticky spot, and then I used my pick-me-up tool and I covered it over the top. Now the fine tip glue comes out very, very watery, so you want to be careful that you tap and very ever lightly squeeze. And then I used my pick-me-up tool to go ahead and cover those. Boy, if I could rip those off and redo it for you, I would. Gosh, I do apologize for that. That happens. Let's talk about these glue dots. If you like to use these glue dots for sequence, that's fantastic. To be quite honest with you, I've never been able to come up with a really proficient way with this, because when I pick up the glue dot here, you can see that I kind of distort the shape, and invariably then it ends up to being too big for the sequin. But these work as well, so if you have those, go for it. I do want to talk about this before we go on to the next card. When you stamp your greeting, believe it or not, use the Melon Mambo ink. I found that the Calypso Coral was just a little bit too light, tone on tone. And I'll be honest with you, this is usually like a Lisa rule. You never use one color ink on another color paper, but it worked out really well for this card. So just want to make sure that you know, stamp your greeting in Melon Mambo. All right, we're on to our next card. You'll find the contents in the envelope as well. And all you're going to need from this, of course, is the card base itself, which has already been cut, scored, and embossed for you. Isn't that folder absolutely beautiful? We're going to work on our scratch paper again, and this time you're going to use the stamp that has the large heart with the floral image. I'm using my Memento black ink. It's just my black ink of choice with photopolymer. You can use whatever you have. I do tell you not to use solvent-based ink on your photopolymer stamps. They will ruin them, so no stays on. All right, so we've got our image here, and I'm going to stamp that. Again, if you're making two, make sure you stamp two of them. You're going to want to make sure that you give that a couple seconds to dry depending on what ink that you're using. We're going back to our same ink pads again, and we're going to use our daubers in both of those colors. I'm bringing those daubers back in. I'm going to start with the Melon Mambo, and because I've used it on the previous card, it's probably going to have quite a bit of ink on it, so I want to make sure that it's not too dark. All right, so I'm going to pounce some of that off. And I'm working on the roses here. Nice, smooth, gentle swirl inside there. Remember, you can always make them darker, so just start lightly. So I've got those 4 flowers here. Now I'm going to switch. I've got my next dauber, and this time I'm using Calypso Coral. I'm dabbing that on as well, and again, I'm making sure that it's not too strong. And then I'm just going to work in some other areas. I'm working that flower here, and here, and then this one in the center, and then another, just a little bit of color here. So we've just got a little bit of color going on throughout the heart. That's it. Now we're ready to die cut it. Got my magnetic platform again, and I've got my paper here. I'm grabbing the heart die that I think that's going to fit. Yep, this is the correct one. So I'm going to line that up. Again, if you need a Post-it note to help you, go for that and attach that. I'll put my clear mat over the top and I'll crank that through. Alright, so now I've got my heart. If you're going to add words, now is the time to do that. The nice thing about this card is you can always add a greeting later up at the top if you're not sure what you're going to be using it for. Again, I'm going back to this Celebration stamp set, which is the one that I used originally for my sample and my Memento ink, just because it's handy, and I'm stamping the word friends. You're going to see that I'm going to make sure that it's going to fit. Okay, and now I'm ready for this. One last step is I did take the dauber that had the melon mambo on it, and I went around the edges. I wanted to make sure it wasn't too dark, but just added a little bit of color around the edges. I noticed that it was too white. It blended into my background a little bit too much for my taste. So if you'd like this, go ahead and use your dauber with the remaining ink that's on it and just go around the edges. Now I'm going to add my dimensionals. I'll take a few here. I'm going to add them on each of those sides and then one here at the bottom. Then we'll take off that paper backing. And then that card will go here. Again, making sure that I've given myself ample room. And mount that here. Inside that Ziploc bag, you're going to grab your sequins. These are from the Metallics assortment. I really like these. They pick up so many different color shades, and I find that they're extremely versatile. Got my 2 sequins, and then just position those like we did with the previous card to make sure you've got them where you want them. And I'm so glad now because I get to show you once again, before the camera ran out last time, on how to use these. Remember we talked about these. These are the glue dots that are in the paper pumpkin kit, and they are on flat paper backings. So I'm able to pick them up and keep the glue dot flat, place it exactly where I want it, take off that paper backing, and then with my little pick-me-up tool, I can pick that up and stick that right on the top. All right, and then I can show you now the fine tip glue. Boy, I'm glad this worked out the way it did so I can show you. So unscrewed the white cap that left me a needle tip. I always make sure that it's, you know, open and free. Fine tip glue, again, is very, very thin, and you want to make sure that you don't put too much. So I've got a little bit going on there, and then I'm going to place that over the top. And then I'll just let that dry. Your finger's going to go here along the side. Use the needle to go back inside the cap and then just screw that in place. That'll help make sure that it never clogs for you. It's a great product. Okay, we'll let that sit and dry, and we are ready for our last card. I'm really excited about this last card. This is a size that we've not done in Studio Stamps in the mail before, and it fits in a regular medium envelope. Inside here, you're going to find your supplies. Your designer papers are going to be different. Please remember that they do come assorted. Everything in that suite of products does color coordinate. I'm just pulling out everything here to make one card with you. Also remember the papers are double-sided, so if you like one side better than the other, feel free to flip them over. They are all stunning. I almost forgot. Down inside the envelope, you've got 2 pieces, 2 squares of designer series paper. You're going to need to pull those out as well. I'm going to start by folding the card base in half. Remember, all the cutting dimensions too are in that PDF tutorial that I sent you. Got my bone folder there for that crisp edge. I have corner rounded the powder pink and the gold foil using the envelope punch board. It's got a built-in corner rounder in it. Absolutely love that. It gives me a really nice corner every time. I'm going to start by stamping the words, so use what you have at home. Again, I'm defaulting to that amazing celebration stamp set called Happy Wishes. Remember, this is a level 2, so it's a $100 order, and then you can choose this for absolutely free. Using my Melon Mambo ink, I've mounted the words "For You," and I'm going to stamp those way up here near the top. This is going to get mounted to the foil, so I'm going to add some adhesive to the back. And it's going to leave just 1/8 of an inch border around it. So I'm just going to do a really thin border of that gold. Going to rub from the back so I don't smear any ink. The designer series paper, based on what side that you like. Well, I'm telling you, I'm really liking both of them. You know what? Just to give you another idea of what something looks like, let me do this one with this side up. I like to switch it around to give you alternates so that you can see what the different color variations look like. Love that the papers are double-sided. All right, so this is going to get mimicked here in the center, leaving a white border all the way around. The next step is we're going to mount this on top. So I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive here. And that's going to go in the center of the card base. And then inside the Ziploc bag, we are going to pull out the light pink mini tinsel trim. You'll have a gold and you'll have the light pink. So pretty, isn't it? And this is going to go around here. And then I'm going to tie a bow all the way over here to the right side. Don't be afraid to pull this tautly. The last thing you want is for this to slip off because it is kind of slippery. Okay, now if your bow's too big like mine, go ahead and pull it tight. Put your finger here on the knot and then lightly pull the other end, and that'll adjust the loops for you. A little bit harder with the tinsel because it's rough, but just take your time. I gave you plenty, so you'll be able to maneuver that really well. Then go ahead and take your scissors and then give your ends a haircut. I'm going to set that aside. We're going to go back to the scratch paper. I've mounted the heart with the polka dots on it, and I'm using Melon Mambo ink, so I'm going to go ahead and tamp that. And again, if you're making two, make sure you stamp two. So I'm going to stamp that here. Lots of firm, even pressure, and take your time because you want a really nice, clear image. I am going to take my scissors now, and I'm going to cut this down to make it a little bit easier for me because I'm actually going to die cut the small heart on that square at the same time. So I've got this one, and then I've got this one. I'm looking for the heart that's the right size, and it looks like it's this one. Then I'm going to use the smallest of those hearts in that series for this designer series paper. Isn't this pretty? I'm going to go ahead and line this up on here. And then I'll line this one up on here. The designer paper is very variegated, so your pattern is going to look different probably than this one. You're looking for just some of the variation of colors. I'm going to cover that. And then I'm going to crank that through. All right, so we've got our hearts. And then we have our small heart as well. Back here at the card is where we are going to assemble these. So I'm going to flip those over again, and we're going to be using some dimensionals. And again, I'm going to put two there and then one here at the bottom. I want to make sure that this is balanced nicely when it goes over the tinsel trim. I'll take off the backings on this. I stick them down there pretty good. Okay, and then this one is going to go here. I chose to kind of hang it off the side a little bit. And then my last one is my designer paper little heart here. And then that one I'm actually going to mimic off to the side. Oh, that's so pretty, isn't it? And that's our last card. If you made all the cards with me today, you're going to have 8. You'll have 2 of these, and you'll have 2 of these. And 2 of these, and finally the one we started with, 2 of these. Thank you so much for joining me for the January Studio Stamps in the Mail, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next month with a brand new kit. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.